Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Camel titled Freefall. And if we switch over to here, this was not directly requested by Sakre402. They would like me to review Nimrodal, the Procession, the White Rider, but the track's about 9 minutes, and it's just outside the 7 minutes sort of like time limit I have for these song reviews. So I decided to check out Freefall. It's a similar situation to the Spawn of Possession track, where I'm going with where Angels Go Demons Follow as well. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, we got Freefall off of the Mirage album, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Let's do it. I'm looking forward to something a bit different. Apparently this is progressive. Cool use of the synth. Mr. Grayson's a group bass to it with the guitar and organs, drums. Catchy, man.
I close my eyes inside my head. I start falling helpless to the ground. Down, 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 down. Oh yeah. Smoke rings around me and bright sparks of fire flash by as I go. I got the feeling and it takes me higher than I'll ever know.
Is that purely the keys on the right side and the guitar on the left? Great change of pace with the did the tempo shift? Or was it just sort of the flow of the time signature? Or the meter? It's such a phenomenal percussion performance as well. The drums are so tight.
snowflake falls.
Wow.
Down, 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 down. I close my eyes.
That's the epitome of
inside my head,
progression.
I start fall helpless to the ground. Down, 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 down. Oh yeah. Smoke rings around me and bright sparks on fire flash by as I go. I got the feeling and it takes me higher than I'll ever know. Go, 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 go. Oh.
So I first of all want to thank Sacre 402 for introducing me to Camel. This is the first time I've heard them. I adore their music, and it gives me confidence outside of the reviews that if I listen to Nimrodal, the Procession, the White Rider, that sort of 9-minute long track, that I will be in safe hands. But we're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Camel titled Freefall. Now in this section I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general sort of thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track's about? This track isn't super focused on the vocals. There are moments where we kind of go through a stanza that I think is repeated in both times that we have it, or it's at least it's very, very similar. I think it's going between the feeling of being in free fall and like kind of maybe the freedom from that, although I need to sort of double check it. But then we talk about the rings of smoke and then feeling higher, and then we're kind of feeling like we need to go. So is it something to do with the kind of like maybe going down to earth and then the fire coming from that and us kind of being risen up? Is it more of an allegory for kind of like the rings of smoke being like maybe drugs or something like that and us getting high off of that? Like he talks about how he's helpless stumbling to the ground and then rings of smoke surround me and then he kind of picks himself back up and then it's just getting him to go. So I'm wondering if it's kind of like life dropping you on your feet and you being expected to move and it's just the constant movement of it. I think I need more time with it. But I almost feel like the vocals are the icing on the cake at the end of the day, you know, considering how busy everything else is there. Everything else is enough and the story is just a bit of added context for why it exists in the first place. The vocals that tell the story are relatively kind of relaxed in comparison to a lot of the other kind of crazy zany stuff that's going on with the keys, the organ, the guitar, the bass, and the drums. It's a phenomenal instrumental performance, like amazing technical proficiency with a wide variety of things that we'll discuss in a moment. But just the vocals, I like how down to earth and accessible they are. They're like catchy as bow, 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 bow. We got these kind of melodies that kind of bounce around and go, go, go. And we kind of reiterate upon that and the repetitions of it or the second times of it. And we kind of are very comfortable with that message after the journey that we had in the middle, that maybe we're just kind of going through another loop of being in free fall and then kind of rising back up again. But just we have solid head and chest voice, so we're comfortable in our range. And we communicate well with the listener. We're not we haven't got a super amount of presence in the mix, but just enough to be a part of the ether and to sort of take it all in with everything else. And after a couple of lessons maximum, you'll basically understand what you've got going on. And so basically it's just time to talk about literally everything else within this piece. As the start of an album, I completely respect that we're beginning with just silence and then kind of rising things up there. We have this tremendously intense kind of synth thing going on at the beginning there, which kind of makes it sound like we're going to go through a kind of wild sort of sci-fi journey. And just the drama and tension from that slow rise, as well as the mixing around with the sort of LFOs and sort of like filters and stuff like that. It's very cool. And we have these kind of synthesis, and we have these synthesizers continuing with the sequencer as we bring the kicks in and the guitars. And this isn't going to be like a play-by-play of how the track went, because you literally just heard it. It's just discussing things from a structural perspective across this 5-minute 52. It's like we have about a dozen different combination of instrumental components, different solo sections, even little kind of asymmetrical sort of like melodies going on between the guitars on one side and the keyboard on the other there. There's just a wonderful world that is created through the multiple different instances of things coming together. And I love how, despite the changes in time signature and the changes in meter and maybe even in tempo, with it kind of, I can hear us sort of slow down over the course of one of the parts there. So we're not playing to a click. We can just play incredibly well. We can just play well enough to not need that. And it's testament to their skill level that they're able to incorporate all these different time signatures and key changes and time signatures and sort of like tempo changes, and to sort of move with each other and have that phenomenal chemistry with another. They're a fantastic band in terms of their instrumental performances, but it also makes a track more interesting when you switch up the time signatures, the amount of beats per bar and stuff like that. It's very much a kind of, this is this chapter, this is this chapter, this is this chapter, and there's some riffs that are repeated in certain elements that become familiar near the end, almost like a safe harbor, even though there are some parts that sound absolutely dazzling in how beautiful they are, with the clean tones of the guitars, with the keys, just this beautiful chimey sound there, with the really satisfying arpeggios and sort of chord progressions they have there. There are some familiar kind of riffs that return, and you kind of know that you're going back into something more sort of comfortable, but you also appreciate everything else that's been there beforehand and until it. There are some interesting sort of chord progressions played on the guitars and the keys, and I say them both because they kind of combine to make some sort of big chord. Sometimes they're in sort of note unison with each other, sort of that same pitch, or they're doing intervals within a similar octave range. Other times they have a lower range and one's going up, and the bass underneath is just so supportive of whatever they're up to with the different chord progressions, and even some asymmetrics or like things outside the diatonics or chromatics there. We're comfortable using a variety of sort of major and minor and dominance, and even so there'll be some modal passages as well. And I like the use of extensions to illustrate a sense of complexity harmonically, sort of like a sophistication there, in a way that's actually kind of warranted because of the way that they can play. And also, again, the technicality of the composition of it with all the various sort of parts to its structure and the way they intertwine seamlessly. And I love the fluidity of the drums, how like we're just so comfortable working with our quarters, eighths, triplets, sixteenths as well as 30-seconds, because we've got that kind of speed to this. Lots of little bits of finesse, like little kind of like cymbal like rolls on the cymbals there, as well as the snares there. Very adept at going between the various sort of like tom and sort of snare and kick core components, whilst exploring the cymbals on our kit as well. A wide variety of different grooves and patterns there, sometimes with the hi-hat, sometimes with the rides. And we have a great sort of balancing within the piece there, especially considering that the guitar again is mostly on that left side and the organ is mostly on that right, which I know is the opposite for you guys, but bear with me. I haven't flipped the camera there. It's just so cool, man. It's just such cool, because you often get guitars being double tracked nowadays. And I'm not sure this was recorded when mono was more of a thing than stereo or not. I'm not sure when this was recorded. It says here 1974, so I'm not sure where we were with mono versus stereo recording. For those who aren't familiar, mono is when things are recorded into one audio channel, so one speaker, and then stereo is splitting a track across the entirety of two different speakers. And I think that people have grown up with stereo, such as myself, kind of take mono for granted, but like take it for granted, should I say, but mono is a big choice. And what happened was, because people were recording in mono, they would just have the guitar on one side and they'd just have the keyboard on the other when they had to put it into the stereo field. And sometimes you had the entire drum kit on one side of the stereo field because they didn't know where to put it in, because it was difficult to get that. Now it was an artistic or creative decision they made when they were remastering it. Here though, the drums are fully explored. They're very sort of comfortable exploring all the, yeah, I can hear that there's different like tom patterns and stuff like that goes to the right of the stereo field there. And we're very kind of like consistent with our tempo and groove on the kit as well, no matter what we're doing. It's very difficult to play this well, this neatly, this tightly, with such chemistry and cohesion across a 6-minute track. It's just, you need to do it in one take, and they were just so tight with an imminent kind of obvious chemistry with one another. But then you've also got the lead guitar doing bendy kind of squiggly hammer on a pulley-offy kind of stuff. There's some bluesy kind of rock stuff that just kind of pops off. And so you just have guitar solos, whilst the keys on the other side kind of hold it together. Other times, you've got like the 332 mark where there's glissando from the keys between sort of like parts or loops of it. But we've just got this great unison harmonically between those guitars and keys where the bass props it up and the drums are kind of working in sort of a sense of sort of like rhythmic unison with that. And just down, dum-de-dum, just these catchy little melodies that are just as interesting, if not more interesting than the vocal parts. I think they understood their strengths and weaknesses here, and that's not me saying that the vocals are a weakness, they're not. It's just they know they've got so much else they can pull out of their goodie bag. And there's some other parts where it's Triller picked and far more intense, and it kind of reminds me of the boss music from Final Fantasy VII in a way. But there's such an allowance as well when we have the vocals come in. There's just such an allowance for that to be there. There's more of a kind of an accented kind of chord note sort of like pace on the guitars or the key patterns. And we have, like the bass and drums being a bit more sort of like, not generic, but like consistent with its 4/4 timing, just to allow the listener to kind of nod their head along to what the vocalist is saying before getting lost within everything else within all the other instrumental sections. Just to confirm as well, I think it is all the same tempo. When there's like slight changes, but there's just a similar groove throughout the entirety of it. Dude, it's just, oh my goodness. It's just rare to hear nowadays, because it's that temptation to fix it in post nowadays. But I just think if we were to try and I'd go through why each individual part of this track worked, it's more general comments that I suppose would be more helpful without diminishing returns. We are very sort of like aware of what notes work within the key signatures and scales relevant. We're comfortable modally interchanging between things. We kind of know the amount of times we can do a loop of something with variations and tails on the guitar key or drum parts before the listener will get disinterested in it. So we kind of switch before that point. We have unconventional or unexpected amounts of bars in certain parts before we switch. And we just kind of maybe have like 3 or 4 times per meter as opposed to the 4 before. And we kind of like switch things up there too. And just the way that we kind of like fade the track out at that 5.5 minute mark back with that sort of like synth and that guitar kind of oscillation there. And we kind of let the listener know, hey, that's the bell curve. Hopefully you enjoyed your time. The build up to center and then back down. We're free falling again. It's just such good telegraphing because it's just, we get rewarded for our patience, but then we never feel like it's being tested in the first place. But it's just, as a final comment before we talk about the theme and the conclusion, or the studio production, should I say, just the fact that we can have the sub leads but on the side there at a similar sort of volume that we might have them otherwise, just, and the vocals are still going on there, that we find that kind of cool and response to that little gap there to fill, just that little bit of kind of tension is just wonderful. They are very, very precise and very efficient in their performing. Thematically, I think, again, the kind of bluesy phrasing with the rock and the pentatonics and stuff like that alongside everything else kind of insinuates that we might be having a bit of a rough time with a situation we're in, such as the first half of the verse parts. But then we get into these parts which is very kind of wonderful and mesmerizing, and almost kind of comes to expect that we're locked into this kind of loop. Maybe because we just kind of are okay with that. I'm not sure. It's just a really wild journey. And again, I get the impression that a lot of Camel tracks might be like this. And I think it's just a treasure trove of material to peruse. But it makes me excited because they're happy to push the boundaries and push the envelope and see what else they can come up with. And I love when musicians take what they're saying serious, what they're doing seriously, but they also put the listeners into consideration there. It's exciting. The studio production is usually the icing on the cake, in addition to the vocals. And here, this is, to be fair, a remaster, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if it's the original or remaster, but either way, I think that it was handled wonderfully. I'm really satisfied with the way the vocals were captured, as well as the guitar, bass, drums, and keys. Initially, with a lack of chords on the guitar and key parts there, like there's less kind of like heaviness to those, and I kind of like that we're not going too sort of like intense with it, because it almost kind of keeps things relatively upbeat despite some of the intensity of the chord progressions or like the bass lines, or like the note choices that we choose. It kind of remains upbeat and sharp and precise, and the drums are captured eloquently as well, with the bass being nicely rounded and low end. I think the guitar and the keys being in a similar spectrum, or being not in the same but great in depth there, is just a fun idea stylistically. And so we made the most of the stereo field as well as the frequency spectrum. There's dynamic range to this. Again, you have that in-start part, and then kind of like the synth kind of comes in. It's like, oh, okay, what's happening here? And then we kind of get into groove of the piece. It's very mysterious, and then you get that extra kind of content, and you're off through the rest of the album. Nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting is handled. And ultimately, just a really wonderful track that I have to thank Sakura for recommending Camel. I love it. I'm keen to check out more in future. There is no applicable constructive critique. I don't think they need to do a thing to improve this. I just think it's a great sort of concept on its own, and it advertises the rest of the album well. And then from a general listening perspective, I do like my experimental journey music, and I just think that there are musicians, we as musicians can learn from tracks like these for two different reasons. The first reason we can learn from it is because it invites us to continue to work on our technique and become as tight, with our abilities as these musicians were, who again, they just had to play well. I know I sound like such a boomer saying it, but they couldn't fix it in post. They just had to give incredibly tight performances. So I appreciate that, but also it's that we got invited on a journey that was unpredictable yet incredibly satisfying, and there were no moments where I felt like I was being taken advantage of or kind of led by the nose. It was very pleasant, and you could just have a conversation with them, and it was just great to listen to. So thank you very much for watching my review of this track from an act named Camel titled Freefall. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via the various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP reviews. Spiderhands out.